Hello, welcome to another Melbourne AWS user group. Thanks for sticking around and watching this, wherever you're watching this from. If you're out at the pub, well done. How you got a booking, I don't really know because I haven't been able to. But you know, we are finally moving out of this stage. But for the interim, I guess we'll continue on with our virtual user groups as we are. And yeah, so this is the 98th meetup, I believe. And I've lost count of actually how many we're done under lockdown virtually this way now. But hey, look, we're still here, we're still kicking along, and hopefully one day we're able to actually meet again in person sometime next year. So let's kick off. We don't want to keep running too long. Whoops. I didn't set my desk up very well this month. But I do have the right slides, so that's at least a positive. So this is the introduction section that I'm doing now. They're up there. We'll have a brief news segment after me, where Ian and friends will run through what's new in AWS for this month. We have Guy Morton back with us again. Fans of the podcast will be very familiar with Guy. Our first presenter tonight is Tushar, who's talking about secure governance using AWS Landing Zone. And then straight up after that will be Hamid from one of our sponsors. He'll be taking a rough evolution of AWS programming interfaces. And this looks like it'll be a really good one that covers a lot of bases. I'll wrap up after that, and we will be having our usual post-stream Zoom catch-up for anybody that wants to be involved. You'll find the link to that on the Slack channel, which is... I don't know where the button for that is. This one. That's it. So the way this meeting runs, this is your first one, welcome along. Please ask questions. Please get involved. You can ask questions in our Slack channel on #Melbourne, on the Melbourne channel. You can use the AWS Melb hashtag on Twitter, or right there on YouTube. You just feel free to type away in the chat, and we'll see how we go. At the end of the speakers' presentations, myself or Ian will jump on the broadcast with them, and we'll ask the questions on your behalf. There's a good chance for us to have more of a conversation style, get answers to the questions that you're looking for. Usually our speakers will be around, hopefully on Slack or on the YouTube chat, to answer any questions if you do have any that you don't make in time for the question section. And comments or feedback at any time are also welcome via the same channels. Please, we really love feedback. It helps us to improve the broadcast, helps us to improve the group, and all feedbacks are welcome. So we'd like to thank, first of all, our gold sponsor, Enabler. They've been with us now for 2 years, and we're very appreciative that they've stuck with us throughout the 2020 and everything that's been going on. Hamid, our second speaker tonight, is from Enabler, so we're very grateful to him for this presentation. Our silver sponsors are AC3, CMD, and Do It International. A big thank you to those 3 companies as well for their support. So just a very brief who are we? My name is Rob. I'm also known as Bok, or Bok_ on most social media or Slack teams. And my co-host is Ian, who you'll meet during the What's News segment. He'll be the one in the top corner of the screen up there. Neither Ian nor I work for AWS. We're all just members of this community, the same as you are. We work for various consultancies in various other things, but day to day, we're not paid by AWS to be here. We put these on because we like sharing, and we've been around in this community for a very long time. Speaking of the community, the best way to get involved and to talk to everyone is via our Slack team. There's somewhere in the order of 600 members of the Slack team there now. And we do have our days when it's quite busy with the chat. Some days it's quiet, it varies. But it is a good place to ask any questions, get any help with, if you're new to AWS. There are jobs channels as well for the posting of jobs if you're looking for work. and a couple of side channels like the outages channel and the announcements channel, where there's a chance to, we've got some automated feeds running of outage info and announcements. It's a great way to spur conversation on what's new and what's broken, especially what's broken when Sydney breaks. That gets very busy. There's also a volunteers channel, which, if my slides are correct, leads me perfectly into this one. We're always on the lookout for people to help out. We're always looking for speakers, for sponsors, and for general volunteers. There's lots of little jobs that need to be done month in, month out that we could really use a lot of help with. So if anybody wants to put their hand up to do that, there's a volunteers channel on Slack. Please jump into that. All right, so before we get into the news, just a quick look at what other events are on that you might want to check out. There is a new cloud security meetup that is holding their first event tomorrow night, or no, that's tomorrow 9 a.m. Tomorrow morning. I think it goes for an hour. And it's the first event of a Melbourne chapter for a larger global meetup. And it's a great first meetup. They're going to be looking at compliance in AWS for beginners. So you just use that link just there to go to their group. And there is also the Melbourne API and microservices meetup. Then this is not an AWS focused meetup. Again, this is tomorrow. This one's at 5:30 p.m. But they are talking about mutual TLS auth with, that should say API gateway, not AWS gateway. But yeah, so that's a newly or recently announced feature. So it's great for them to take a deep dive and look into this. Again, the meetup link is just there. And I think that's all of the slides that I have. So without further ado, we'll skip on to our next agenda item, which is the news.
Thanks, Rob. And thank you, everybody, for coming, despite the ability to not be at home. So it was a busy month. So let's just dive into it with finally in Sydney.
G'day.
So we've got Connect support for Lexbots with Australian English. Always fun. New bare metal instances available, G4DN, and IoT Sidewise. That might be something you're interested in, Guy.
Yeah, so this is a service that's been around, obviously, elsewhere, other regions before. It's sort of for, if you've got a factory and you've got a lot of IoT devices you need to collect data from and manage, that's what it's for. So if that's you, then be excited.
And another feature that is finally for us now is audio snapshot export to S3. This allows you to more easily share your snapshots or import them into other databases that are not necessarily.
Yep. Yeah, so you can export. So basically, you're exporting your data to Parquet format, so you can then use it with Athena and EMR and SageMaker.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
All very cool.
On the server side, there were a couple of big
ones. Yeah.
Yeah, both in preview. Do you want to take them?
Yeah, so I actually I spent a little while this afternoon trying to get my head around Lambda extensions and how they work. So so the Lambda extensions, so they use you deploy them using the layers function that's already in Lambda. Essentially, what they do is they have a second, so they sort of run in parallel with your Lambda function, and you can do stuff that sort of around the life cycle of the Lambda function itself. So before it inits, you can use an extension to preload secrets, say, like from Secrets Manager. You can have an extension that grabs secrets and writes them into environment variables for your function to then consume, your Lambda function to consume. And then the other common use case is for an extension that will be collecting like log data and metrics about your function that then it can kind of, the extension lifecycle spans all the invocations of your Lambda function, and then, you know, when the Lambda, when its sort of lifecycle is over, the extension lifecycle ends after the Lambda function lifecycle, so it can do things like ship logs at the end of that lifecycle. Yeah, so it's kind of an interesting capability. It's probably got some useful use cases, but it's probably got a lot of, like a lot of things with Lambda nowadays, it's probably got opportunities for abuse as well. So don't get too excited and go and write an extension, because it's probably not, well, you might have a good reason to do it, but then again, you might not. So anyway, it's a new feature, and yeah, check it out. And Lambda Insights is implemented as a Lambda extension.
Yeah. And Lambda Insights, yeah, it's clearly for getting better and more logs and automated dashboards and extra health data about your Lambda functions. And a very good thing.
Yeah, it's very cool.
So I'm sure that over the coming months we'll all play around with it, despite what Guy says about being careful. Just where's the fun in that?
That's right, absolutely. What's the point of having a new feature if you can't abuse it?
Exactly. Let's have a look on the container side. For EKS users, Kubernetes 1.18 is now supported, which means that EKS is now definitely not far behind regular Kubernetes anymore. That went to 1.19 not that long ago, so it's good to be almost caught up with that. The configurable service IP address range is a bit of an edge case, edge use case. So if it's something, it's mostly to do with connections between multiple clusters. So if it is something you're interested in or that you need, it's great that it's there. Otherwise, you can probably just ignore it. And ECS extensions in CDK, again, a preview only, but CDK is fun to play around with, and the more tooling there is for it, the better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. DevOps. Okay.
So the CloudFormation limits, I think there'll be some sort of enthusiasm for that. The maximum size of a template that can be passed as an S3 object is now at 1 meg, previously 450K. Limits for resources is up to 500, previously 200. Parameters is 200, previously 60. Mappings is 200, previously 100. And outputs is 200, previously 60. So a lot of increases in the, I guess, the limits that existed on what you can do with CloudFormation. So that will be kind of good for some people wrangling very large environments with CloudFormation, I would imagine.
Yep. Especially if you, for one reason or another, didn't split up your templates. It's definitely good. In a similar vein then is probably CloudFormation Guard, which is another way to validate your CloudFormation templates. It came out in preview a while back and that is now GA.
And so that's the purpose of that, is really to kind of check that you're doing things like encrypting all the things.
Yep.
Yeah.
So definitely something to look into putting into your CI pipeline.
Yeah.
Another one that I personally like is Session Manager shell profiles. This allows you to configure the shell when you use Session Manager to log into an instance, which is good. It allows you basically to have things like a bash or C or change to set shell instead of bash.
Yeah, I can imagine that's for people who are really into their shells and pre-configuring them. It's going to be something nice, a bit of a sigh of relief that they can actually control that now.
Yep. So also some security updates. So S3 object ownership sounds a bit unclear, but what it basically is that it allows you to set your buckets up in such a way that when somebody uploads an object, the owner immediately changes to you, or rather your account.
And that's gonna help in a bunch of cases where you've got a multi-account set up and you've got different things writing objects. And you can get into a situation where things get written into your buckets that you own or previously that you couldn't access because the ownership was with the writer of the object rather than with you. So it kind of addresses that problem too.
Yeah.
Yep. Go on. I was just going to say I'm maybe jumping ahead to the WAF support for AppSync. That's nice. So GraphQL APIs is what AppSync's about. So you can now put WAF in front of that, which is a nice thing to have.
Let's just look at some other cool stuff.
Yeah. You've mentioned RDS in Sydney. Is that a reference to the Graviton stuff, or is it something new?
That is the Graviton stuff.
Of course, yes. Which we had to mention because we have to mention it every month for what is it? 6 months? What's the challenge?
But yeah, as Guy talks around, you can now have RDS instances using the new Graviton 2 instance types, which basically means you get the best of both worlds. As you don't manage it, you get the increased cost.
Price performance, yep.
Performance benefits,
which
is good, but you don't have to rewrite your application to run an ARM.
Yep.
So,
and I must have missed the elastication EMR support too. That's cool.
Yep.
Yeah, nice.
Those are unfortunately not yet in Sydney.
No.
But we need to have something to talk about next month.
Yeah, absolutely. We need to talk about Graviton every month. That's a definite. Yeah.
Yeah.
RAM and Elasticache support for Outposts. I guess they're just adding services to Outposts, bit by bit. So that's good to see.
Yep.
And CloudFront Origin Shield. I was just talking with you about this before we started, and so CloudFront's already a cache, right? It's a CDN, so it's caching your content at the edge location. So Melbourne POP and Sydney POP, there's POPs everywhere at the edge of the network. So what this is, from what I can see, is that it's a caching layer that's further back from the edge locations, so that the POPs actually consult that cache before they go back to your origin. And the whole point of that is to shield your origin. I wish they hadn't used the word shield your origin from a lot of requests that otherwise would end up back at the origins. So you're going to save some money, I guess, is the theory.
Yeah, it's a bit of a shared caching layer for the different POPs.
Yep. So that's neat.
Yep. Cool.
and FIFO SNS queues now too. So you could, and origin number selection. So you can presumably that's so you can set the number that appears in an SMS. I'm guessing. I haven't read the announcement for that, so.
Yeah.
If I'm wrong, tell me in the comments.
No, from my understanding, it's. Anyway, I believe we are out of time for talking about this right now.
Join us in the podcast for more.
Listen to the podcast for more, indeed. Aiming to, and we get a shout out from friend of the meetup, Chris, that we forgot to mention that Corretto got its monthly updates. So update your Corretto versions.
Yeah, how did you leave that off the slide, Ian? I don't understand.
I'm disappointed as well.
You've changed.
With that, I will hand it back to Rob.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you guys. Thanks very much for that. Another insightful look at what has changed in AWS in the last month. There was actually a lot there. Like that was, and I think you had to leave off quite a bit too. But hopefully nothing too important, excepting Corretto. All right, so time for our first speaker. First time speaker here at the AWS user group, or Melbourne AWS user group, and we're very grateful. So Shah will be taking us through secure governance using AWS Landing Zone. He is a cloud solutions architect, and he specializes in migration and hybrid cloud architecture. He speaks at lots of community events and on multiple topics. So we're very grateful that he has the time today to come and speak to us. He was one of the key speakers at the recent AWS Community Day 2020 in India too, so that's quite a big accomplishment. We're a little bit of a step down from the Community Day, but still hopefully to show you have a great time, and we'll look forward to your presentation. So without any further ado, I will switch over to that now.
Okay, thank you, Rob. Hi, everyone. So, as Rob mentioned, that I'll be speaking about secure cloud governance today. Okay, my name is Tushar Gupta, and I'm working as a senior cloud consultant with Software One India. So, without much ado, let's start. So, this is about a little bit about myself. Where I've got 10 plus years of experience across enterprise data center and cloud technologies. I'm primarily specialized in cloud migration and hybrid networking architectures. Related to AWS, I've got 3 AWS certifications covering advanced networking specialty and solution architect professional and associate. So you can connect with me on LinkedIn with this. So today I'm going to cover about secure cloud governance, and here is the agenda. I'll start with the first of the introduction, that what is the current enterprise state and the challenges which enterprise organizations are currently facing. Then we'll speak about a little bit on the cloud governance side, where we'll be discussing about key drivers for cloud governance and common cloud governance challenges which enterprises are currently facing, and how AWS Landing Zone solution mitigates those cloud governance challenge. Then I'm going to cover a live demonstration as well, where I'm going to show you how in reality, in practical way, how we can see that all these cloud governance challenges can be mitigated. So let's get started. Let's talk about a typical enterprise situation where a particular line of business is launching a new service, and for that, it places an infrastructure request to central IT team. So now central IT team in order to provision those infrastructure, it takes a sweet amount of time, okay, to provision that infrastructure, put it into their governance, apply all the related service management policy. And this actually relates to these issues, which are high lead time, which normally line of business gets places an infrastructure request, and infrastructure gets provisioned along with governance and service management, which takes from days to weeks. Okay, central ITO team also has to go through process heavy service management, and there are a lot of governance and compliance issues, which we have seen with a lot of okay. So as of now, we have discussed issues which we normally have seen in various enterprise customers, where line of business is waiting for the infrastructure from central IT team, and central IT team takes its sweet own time in putting up governance, process heavy service management to provision the infrastructure, which might lead to high lead time from days to weeks. Okay, and it might miss the deadline of launching a particular service or a product which line of business expects. So with that, we have seen that there's a trade-off between agility versus control, where line of business always focuses on agility for innovation and faster time to market to launch their new services or products. Okay, where central IT team always focuses on the control, that we need to control, have proper governance and service management before we give you the infrastructure to run your services. So with that, the problem arises where we need to we have seen that there's an issue to achieve strong business IT alignment. So how to do that? So with that, AWS saw an opportunity to achieve agility versus control, where we thought that if central IT team can provide the required templates, policies, and best practices to line of business, and if we can have a centralized dashboard for governance, control, and visibility of the infrastructure, and along with that, if there is a mechanism to have uh, automated provisioning and automated service management for the infrastructure provisioning, then we can achieve both agility and control in launching of the new services. And with we can expect lead time reduction, huge lead time reduction from days to weeks to minutes. We can expect a service catalog for landscape management, where line of business can choose which services they can, and they can easily choose that from the service catalog, and central IT team can easily provision that in an automated manner. And along with that, not only infrastructure provisioning, but we can also automate service management with that. So let's talk about cloud governance overall. So first, let's talk about governance at AWS. So governance is one of the key perspectives of our cloud adoption framework. So whenever we ask customers to adopt AWS cloud, we always strive, and we always ask customers to look on all these 6 perspectives where they need to be ready for migration to the cloud, and governance is a very, very important perspective of AWS CAF. Okay, so with that, AWS expects to maintain speed and relativity cloud and to have a strong governance over the infrastructure and all the resources which are going to be provisioned in AWS cloud. So with that, let's talk about the key drivers which any enterprise expects from the cloud governance. First is standardization. Okay, so this is where, as the name suggests, we need to have a standardization across multiple AWS accounts for different business units. Okay, we need to find some way that there needs to be all the standard policies and procedures across multiple accounts from a centralized position. Security is one of the key requirement for every enterprise customer, where be it AWS cloud or on-premise, they always have to have secure and compliant infrastructure for their data production and audit perspective. With that, Central ITO team also expects from the cloud governance that they need to be operationally efficient with quick infrastructure provisioning and automated service management. Challenges which we understood from the cloud governance is that organizations lack control and visibility of all the resources which they're running in the cloud. Okay, whenever they scale into the cloud, in the AWS cloud with multi-account or multiple resources, they often lose control and visibility of the infrastructure which they are running into the cloud. Okay. Enterprise also face a lot of time integration challenges whenever they scale their infrastructure in cloud with multi-account structure, or be it within an account multiple VPCs. So they fail to have common integration or standardized integration across those environments. They often fail to have a standardized defined multi-account strategy. Okay, though they understand that yes, we do need multi-account structure in AWS, but they do not have any well-defined multi-account strategy that this is the best way to implement a multi-account structure in AWS. And the last thing is delegation of responsibility. They often struggle with the responsibility ownership of whenever they scale in infrastructure. So as Guy and Ian was also discussing about S3 object ownership. Okay, so whenever they scale, they often lose that. Okay, who will be responsible for this particular task whenever I go with a multi-account structure, or if I scale my infrastructure in AWS cloud. So with that, we understood that the need of the hour is first is automated provisioning. Okay, so with automated provisioning, as the word says, we need to have automation of all the related infrastructure. Okay, which is going to be created as there is some requirement from line of business to the central IT team. Second is related to security and compliance, where we need to have some mechanism to automate that compliance check as well, compliance check and control. Third is the well-defined multi-account structure, and this is what whenever we consulted various customers who are actually planning to migrate to the cloud and who are running a lot of workloads in their on-premise, they often look for multi-account structure, well-defined multi-account structure, so that they can easily manage those workloads for their different business units. And third, from the financial perspective, customers often look for consolidated billing. They do not want to have multiple invoices raised for multi-account structure for different business units. Okay, so these are the four key items which we understand that the need of the hour is from the cloud governance side. Okay, so these all the challenges which we have discussed and the requirements of cloud governance is actually you can say is catered by AWS Landing Zone solution. So we are going to discuss that now. So before we jump into AWS Landing Zone solution, what is the Landing Zone solution all about? We need to understand that why we cannot live with one AWS account. So these are the few reasons why one AWS account is not enough. And this is primarily true for the big enterprise customers who are planning to run multiple workloads for their multiple locations or business units or environments. Okay. So enterprise customers who run different business units where central IT team is a shared function, okay, across different business units, they often have issue into chargeback. Okay, so that's where they adopt multi-account structure, where they can isolate different resources, different infrastructure resources into multiple accounts as per their requirements, be it business units, be it environment, be it locations. Okay, organizations often have to have different security and compliance controls for which is quite difficult to maintain within a single account. So that's why they adopt multi-account structure. From the compliance and from the environment perspective, they often look for isolation of resources, which is also possible with the multi-account structure and can be easily managed with AWS Landing Zone solution. So we are going to look at that, how they can still have multi-account structure, but they can still centrally manage all those accounts under one umbrella. Okay, and as I mentioned earlier, that an enterprise can have multiple business processes or can have multi-environment, which is somewhat far more difficult to manage within one AWS account. So that's why they adopt multi-account structure. But with that, we have also seen that even though organizations adopt multi-account structure, but without the lack of well-defined multi-account strategy in place, they often struggle with a lot of issues in even though they have multi-account structure. Okay, so even though the organizations have created multi-account for different purposes, but they still do not have centralized management. So they normally face issue with the centralized management. They still find a way or find a mechanism to have standard or account level baselines where they can easily provision account and security baselines across all the accounts which they are managing in their enterprises. Okay, it's still a manual provisioning of all accounts with high lead time. Okay, though we have adopted a multi-account structure, but still central IT team takes its own sweet time to provision all the accounts with the required governance and service management. The distributed service management is also we have seen with various customers where they have different service management portfolios for different accounts across different business units. And definitely from the financial perspective, if we do not have any consolidated billing, they still find it difficult to manage cost for different accounts. So what is the solution for that? So AWS has comes up with a beautiful solution where different services comes together to stitch a solution, is known as AWS Landing Zone. So what is the Landing Zone solution? So Landing Zone is a configured, secure, scalable multi-account AWS environment, which is based on AWS best practices. So with AWS Landing Zone solution, we have a secure, easy to configure, and very much scalable multi-account AWS environment. It can act as a starting point for customers' application migration journey. So the enterprise customers which are looking to migrate to AWS cloud, if they go with the Landing Zone solution, it becomes quite easy for them to have a starting point for their application migration journey, where they can isolate some of their shared services and their workloads into different accounts. So we are going to see that how they can achieve that. It is also provides you an environment which allows you for iteration and extension over time. So as I mentioned that AWS Landing Zone is provides you a scalable multi-account structure. So it is very easy and in a very automated way where you can iterate and extend your AWS infrastructure quite easily over time as per your requirement. So what we can expect from the landing zone, okay, we can expect easy account management where landing zone provides you a framework to create and baseline a multi-account structure. Okay, we can also expect that from the security and role-based access control, we have everything centrally managed from landing zone. Okay, so AWS uses SSO, single sign-on, for all the federation, all the authentication purposes from a centralized point of view. We have, AWS also creates automatically different cross account roles where from one account you can switch to different different accounts, and you can easily manage from one centralized dashboard. Okay, from the security and governance point of view, with multi-account, with a well-defined multi-account structure, you can easily enable segregation of duties, okay, to different accounts. We can create different administrators for different accounts, and based on the responsibilities and the roles and responsibilities of different persons, we can enable access to those accounts for a multi-account structure. And as I mentioned that we require some baseline, a standard baseline architecture. Okay, and that's where AWS Landing Zone also comes to our rescue, where it provides initial account security and our network baselines, where you can automate your account creation and you can put all the security and network baselines accordingly. So let's see how AWS Landing Zone as a solution mitigate our common cloud governance challenges. So today I'm going to show you in the demo as well a service known as AWS Control Tower, which is for landing zone deployment. So landing zone is a complete solution which comprises of a lot of services stitched together to form a solution. And AWS has come up in an automated way to deploy that landing zone within your enterprise, within your AWS organization, to create a scalable multi-account structure. So this is the architecture of AWS Control Tower. As we can see that AWS Control Tower uses AWS organizations. So this is also one of the service of AWS, which is required to manage different AWS accounts under multiple organization units. So by default, AWS organization creates two organization units, core organization unit and custom OU. The core organization unit is primarily responsible for all the shared services. So by default, when you deploy the landing zone using Control Tower, it creates two separate accounts under core organization unit, which is log archive account and security audit account. So as the name suggests, the log archive account is primarily used for management of all the logs.
Hello again. We seem to be having a whole bunch of I/O issues today. It's just nothing seems to want to work fine for us, but we are here. So let's get this. If we can get this back up and running again, I will throw it back to Shah. Apologies for the inconvenience. Sorry, everybody. We should be back up in just a moment.
Okay, thank you, Rob. And sorry for the inconvenience, guys. Some network issues. Okay, so we were discussing about automated deployment of landing zone using AWS Control Tower service, where AWS Control Tower creates AWS organizations, which is also one of the service to manage multi-account structure. When AWS organizations is created by AWS Control Tower, it by default creates two organization units under that. It's a core OU and custom OU. There are two. These two OUs are primarily responsible for hosting shared services and your workload accounts respectively. So let's start with core OU first. By default, there are two accounts created under core OU once you deploy the landing zone using control tower. First is log archive account, and second is your security audit account. Log archive, as the name suggests, that this account is primarily used for all the centralized logging of for your CloudTrail and all your config services. So all the logs which are coming from different accounts under whatever you provision here will centrally log back to your log archive account. Security account is primarily responsible for all your security notifications. Okay, so all the security baselines and security notifications comes to this centralized audit account. Okay, so you cannot delete these accounts once a landing zone is deployed, and these are created under your core OU. Custom OU is also created where you can create, as the name suggests, it's a custom. So you can create your custom AWS accounts or provision a new account under that. And all the new accounts which will be provisioned under custom OU, okay, will be having the account and network baselines from these core OUs and AWS organizations. So we're going to see that in our demo today. So control towers actually targets our three pillars of cloud governance to mitigate all our cloud governance challenges. So let's talk about three pillars now. So first is related to account management. Okay, so this is the pillar which is primarily responsible for automatic creation of your account with standard baselines of account and network baselines, as we have discussed. Second pillar of cloud governance, which AWS Control Tower solves the problem, is related to the cost management. The cost management where AWS there was a requirement of consolidated billing and budgets and alerts. So that part also takes care by control tower. Third, the major thing related to audit purposes is for the compliance. Okay, so that's where control tower also uses different services. So I'm going to cover those services in our later slides today. But as of now, you just need to understand that to automate the compliance related alerts and control, AWS Control Tower also focuses on that pillar. So let's see how these pillars are pillars are being managed by AWS Landing Zone solution. So let's talk about first pillar, which is account management. So the problem with multi-account structure, which we discussed a few slides ago, is actually catered by this AWS organizations used by AWS Control Tower. So with AWS organizations, as we can see here, and also we have seen in the AWS Control Tower architecture, that it creates various organization units where you can easily manage your accounts under that OUs. Okay, so there is no limit of OUs as of now, so you can create multiple OUs based on your requirement, which will be managed under one master account. And within that OUs, you can create multiple accounts for your different purposes. So you can create multiple accounts for your development environment, production environment, or based on your business units requirements. Let's say one business unit requires one separate account, so you can create one custom OU or one OU for that particular business unit, and you can create multiple accounts under that. So AWS organizations actually gives you quite flexibility to manage all your accounts under that. The services which are used for account management are AWS organizations. So we have already covered that AWS organizations give you a tree-like structure for managing all your accounts under one AWS organization. Service catalog. So Control Tower uses Account Factory and AWS Service Catalog in the background to automate provisioning of new account with all the related account level and security baselines. Service control policies are primarily for which is, you can say, centralized identity and access management, which you can push from your AWS organizations. So service control policies are basically for your controlling access on the account level. So if let's say you create a service control policy, which is primarily an IAM policy, and you can push to a particular account under AWS organization, so that will override all your IAM policies, which you can create in your individual accounts. Okay, we are going to see that today as well. So let's look at the second pillar of cloud governance, cost management. For cost management, the primary thing to focus is on the consolidated billing. Okay, so if we go with the standard multi-account structure with no organizations and no landing zone deployment, you have to manage different invoices for different AWS accounts. But with AWS organizations, what you get that you can have a centralized consolidated billing under one master account, where you can segregate different bills and invoices based on your different account. But you will get only one invoice, but in that invoice you will get different services consumed by different accounts. So you can also set up different budgets and alerts and notifications for different AWS accounts for different services as well. Third, last but not the least is compliance automation. That's where AWS Control Tower implements guardrails. Okay, so the guardrails are primarily the policies which are pushed or which you can enable for each AWS account which you can create under AWS organization. Okay, for the guardrails actually are of two types, which I'm going to show you in the demo today as well. They're primarily of two types, which are preventive and detective. So as the name suggests, if it is a preventive guardrail and if it is enforced towards your AWS account, so anything which is restricting as per that guardrail policy, which will not be allowed in your account, which is managed under AWS organization. So that's the security, or the you can say account level baselines you can manage using guardrails. Okay, and also another services like AWS CloudWatch and one interactive dashboard also provided by AWS Control Tower. With that, let's jump onto the live demo and then we'll jump onto the questions. Okay. Okay, so this is my SSO page. Okay, so I've already just to save the time, since control tower deployment takes approximately 60 minutes. So I've already created a control tower demo, control tower for this demo, and I can see, you can see here that I've got 4 accounts to manage. One is my master account, which is my AWS Tushar here, and one is my audit and log archive, which we have discussed that these are the shared services accounts, and one account I have provisioned, which is as per my workload account. So I'm just given as a name of a corpus account. So I'm going to show you how does it look like in AWS. So I'm logging in via SSO console and I'm logging into my master account. So first I'll show you AWS organizations. So once you deploy the control tower, once you deploy the landing zone using control tower, by default, AWS organization is created, and the account which you are using for creating a control tower becomes your root and master account. So this is the account, as you can see the star over here. This is the account which I'm logged into, and if you see the structure, we have got root account, root at the top. The root is where my master account is lying, and I've got 2 OUs as we have discussed in our slides as well. One is core OU and one is custom OU. So if I click on core OU, you can see that there are 2 accounts already created under that. And under custom OU, you are free to use, you're free to create multiple accounts under that. In this organization, I'm going to show you some of the policies which you can also create. So this is a page for service control policy. You can create your custom service control policy, and you can attach to a particular AWS account. For this demo, what I have done that I've created a custom tag policy. And if you see the tag policy here, this policy says that if I'm going to create a tag for cost center, the only values which are allowed is HR, IT, and BU1. If I would like to add any other value to this cost center tag, it will not allow me. And this tag policy, if you see here, I have attached to my custom account, which is my Corp Apps account. So as you can see here that it is attached to this Corp Apps account. Okay, let's jump on to the control tower dashboard. So once you deploy the control tower, this is a dashboard you will get. Okay, by default, all the OUs you can see here that these are my core OU and custom OU. You can definitely create multiple OUs based on your requirement, and you can place your accounts under different OUs as well. As you can see here that you have a dashboard to manage your accounts as well. As of now, I have 4 accounts under this control tower, and you can see that all the accounts are enrolled under control tower. So by default, this is my master account. These are my 2 shared services account, log, archive, and audit. And this is my custom account, which I have created. This is the place where your control tower admin or your AWS admin can use to automate your account provisioning. So if you already have some AWS account with you and you want to manage via control tower, you can also do that. Otherwise, if you want to create a particular new account, you can also do that. I'm not going to show you creation that because that takes almost 30 to 45 minutes to provision a new account. But this is how you can provision your new account, where you can provide your account email, what will be the display name for that account, who will be the who will be the admin of that account, and under which OU you would like to put that new account. Okay, so this is how I've created one new account, which I've just shown you, Corp Apps. And this is the place where you can set your network level baseline. Okay, so if you go with edit, you can set that how many private subnet I want, and if I want to allow this to create public access or not, then you can also select that. And once you select this internet accessible subnet, by default it will create some public subnets for you. It will create NAT gateways for your private subnet. It will attach all the internet gateways. Okay, so everything will be done here. And you can also create a CIDR range here where all the accounts will have by default this VPC with you. Okay. As of now, this control tower service is only available into these regions, but in future it's going to expand for multiple regions as well. So what I have done that I've used my Corp Apps account for the demo into US East. Okay. In Australia, we have Asia Pac Sydney as well. Can you hear me? Oh, earlier it was not audible. Oh, just for a few moments. Okay. Right. Okay. Okay. So I was discussing about guardrails. Okay. So the guardrails are the policies which are already created by AWS for you. Okay. And as you can see here, that some of the guardrails are of type prevention and some of the guardrails are detection. So if any account which does not allow, which does not comply to any of the guardrail which are of prevention, so it will not be allowed as per these preventive guardrails. So preventive guardrails, you need to remember that these are already enabled for each account which are already enrolled into the AWS control tower. Detections, as the name suggests, that it can only detect the compliance, you can say the compliance drift or in compliance controls. Okay, you have the flexibility to enable a particular detection guardrail to a particular account or a particular custom OU, and then based on that you can detect all the incompliant resources within that account. So for this demo, what I have done, as you can see, if I go with the dashboard again, you can see that under the non-compliant resources, I can see two of the non-compliant resources under this Corp Apps account. And these are the guardrails I have attached to this custom OU. And for the demo, what I have done, that this guardrail states that disallow EBS volumes that are unattached to EC2 instance. I'll show you the Corp Apps account, and what I have done, that I've created a spare EBS volume and I did not attach to any EC2 instance. So that's where it detects that this is non-compliant. It is not allowed as per my security policy. Another guardrail which I've enabled for this one is that enable encryption for EBS volumes attached to EC2 instances. I did not enable EBS encryption by deliberately, just to show you that it is detected by AWS Control Tower. So this is where your AWS Control Tower or the security admin can easily manage your compliance related stuff. So you can see the compliance report over here that it is non-compliant, and which account is non-compliant you can also see here. Okay, now let's go jump back to the account, which is my Corp Apps account. So I'm going to log in again to my SSO. And as you can see that since I'm logged in via my Corp Apps, I can only see my Corp Apps account. I just clicked on Management Console, and it will just take me to the Management Console of my Corp Apps account. So for the demo, what I have done, that I've created EC2 instance, and I've enabled two guardrails, which is first is that this allows me to create any EBS volumes which are not attached to EC2 instance, and another is that it always push me to encrypt my EBS volumes. So what I did, I did not enable, you can see here. Let me go to volumes first. Okay. So as you can see here that I've created a spare volume which is not attached to any EC2 instance, and this volume, if I talk about, it is also not encrypted. So that's why these two volumes are detected by AWS Control Tower as my non-compliant resources. Okay, and I've also since I've also attached my tag policy to this particular EC2 instance, so let's try that. How does it look like? So let's say if I select this particular EC2 instance, I would like to put a tag. So I have created a tag policy for cost center tag, and I just created let's say AWS user group. By default, it should not allow me because a tag policy is attached to it. So let's say if I click on save, so you can see here that the tag is not allowed for that. So let's say AWS UG, whatever.
Just a 5-minute warning there, Tushar. We're running a bit over time.
Oh, okay, sorry. Okay. So any other tag which is allowed by the tag policy is done. So as you can see that I can add tags to now. Yeah. So this actually completes my demo and my presentation. So I'm moving over to Rob for any questions for that. Thank you.
Hi, Tushar. Sorry about that. We're actually, just because we're running so well behind time at the moment, we might just skip the questions. Doesn't look like anybody has posted anything at the moment anyway. So if you could just hang around and ask any on the YouTube chat, if that's okay. If anybody asks any questions, if you could help out with answering that. So in which case we'll jump straight to our second presenter, who doesn't look like he's back online. Great, thanks very much, Amit. Thanks very much, Tushar. I'm getting mixed up. Okay, so we've got a shared screen, just need an unmuted presenter and we're good to go. Cool, looks good. All right, let's switch it straight over. Yep, I can hear you. Let me just bring it over now.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Hamid from Enabler. You probably have seen me around. I've been coming to this meetup for a while, but I haven't been very active this year, unfortunately, with the COVID and restrictions. But glad to be back and to see that the meetup is still kicking. Enabler is a modern infrastructure consulting company. We do a lot of cloud infrastructure and a lot of container orchestration work with enterprises, and we're very happy to be sponsoring the group. If you find this talk related to your work or your career aspirations, we would love to hear from you, so feel free to get in touch with me after the talk. I've been using AWS professionally since 2010. Primarily, the first product that I was using AWS with was a product that was running on Linode, but used S3 for storage. It was a little bit over 10 years ago, and I thought a lot has changed. We've seen various things come up and go. We've come to talks, to different meetups, and heard about different tools and products that helped developers and engineers like you and me to build AWS infrastructure. And I thought it would be fun to have a little bit of a throwback and have a look at them and see where we are now today. So before we begin, let's start with a little fun fact. Before AWS, as we know it today, Amazon Web Services referred to Amazon's collection of XML services, and this is the Amazon online store. And they even offered a service called ECS, which has nothing to do with Elastic Container Service. It was Amazon's e-commerce service. And so Amazon had a bunch of APIs that they didn't really call them APIs that much. They were mainly known as web services. And this is before REST and SOAP were that popular. And they had these XML over HTTP web services that they called Amazon Web Services. I think it would be less confusing if we call them Amazon's Web Services. At some point in 2004, they started adding services like S3 and SQS to their list of web services. And later on, they added EC2 and SimpleDB, which at some point they realized that it's It's not necessarily directly related to Amazon, and it can be agnostic. So this is 2004 we're talking about. It's a long time ago. It's more than 16 years ago. And to give you an idea of 2004, if you went to facebook.com, this is what you would see. You would see a page for a company called About Face. Facebook.com didn't exist. In fact, it was the Facebook.com. One word with a capital T. In the hindsight, that was a red flag that Zuckerberg is a bit of a weirdo, but we didn't notice it back then. So let's talk about the Amazon's programming interface and the APIs. And if you wanted to go and create an SQS back in 2004, how would you do it? I happened to find an article that explained how one would go and create a queue with Amazon. So the tutorial says that there are 3 ways of doing that. You could use XML over HTTP, what Amazon calls a REST, sounds a bit condescending, or use the SOAP interface, or use XSLT. So a request for that would look like something like this. You would make an HTTP, not even HTTPS. You would make an HTTP call to webservices.amazon.com. You would say that you want to use AWS Simple Queue Service. You would give it your subscription ID. I imagine this was a token that you would generate in the developer console. And you would pick the operation, in this case, create queue, and give your queue a name, and it would come back with an XML response. And that was about it. A little bit primitive. And the fact that it's using HTTP is interesting because, fun fact number 2, to this date, Amazon still supports HTTP without TLS. And I imagine this is for legacy clients, enterprise clients, they still use HTTP, which on private networks can be understandable. In 2006, Amazon announces AWS. It's a standalone company that offers infrastructure as a service. The very first service that they announce is S3. So around that time, if you wanted to use the API and make calls and create resources or have interactions with AWS, you would use the API, which was a REST API. And they still offered SOAP back then, and it used a better approach for authentication. You would sign your requests, and this is the way it works right now as well. You would sign your requests, provide the action to the endpoint of the service that you were after, and you would get an XML response. Around that time, in the developer connection, which is the forum that Amazon had for developers, a gentleman named Mitch Garnott, if I'm not mistaken, created Boto, which was a Python library that made calls to the AWS API. To begin with, he supported S3, SQS, EC2, and Mechanical Turk. And this is Boto 1. This is Mitch. For those who haven't seen him, he's a principal engineer at Amazon, and he's the guy who made Boto, Boto Core, and AWS CLI. Fun fact number 3, Boto is the name of a dolphin in the Amazon River. Mitch was looking for a name that would relate to Amazon, and Boto was the name that he found. And apparently he wasn't very proud of it back then. So at this time, you have the API. You can make direct calls to the API, HTTP API, you use Boto. I imagine there were some other SDKs in other languages as well, but these were your primary ways of interacting with Amazon, or AWS more specifically. Then in 2011, a revolutionary service was announced. It was declarative and majestic, and it was fugly. So if you wanted to have a decent implementation of your AWS, because this is 2011 and DevOps is also all the craze, and you want to DevOps all the things and infrastructure as code all the things, your best bet was to either write everything in a custom-made tool, or a custom-made tool that made calls to the API, Bash, Python, what have you, or create JSON templates and write them from scratch by hand. And if you happen to work in a team, then you were going to be ready to say goodbye to your sanity, because if you got a merge conflict in a CloudFormation JSON template, it was going to be really bad. The example that I have here is not really showcasing the craziness and the madness that you would encounter, but it gives you an idea. So people started thinking, and one of the things were that AWS CLI back then was very nice. You could type the command AWS, then the service that you wanted and the action that you wanted, give it the parameters, and it would get the output. So someone thought, Boto is a little bit overcomplicated, and it's not very easy to get it to do things that you want it to. You have to do a lot of juggling of things that you have to, clients that you have to create, services that you have to create, and all of that in order to make a simple call. And CloudFormation is also terrible. So what if we just made calls to the AWS CLI? And then you could hack chain the outputs of each command as an input to the next command. So here I have an example, then an ENI is created, and then the ENI is attached. So you wouldn't need to know what resource IDs you were going to get, because you had it chained. So this was created by yours truly. And fun fact number 4, when this tool was uploaded to GitHub, Mitch saw it and noticed it, and he was one of the people who started that project. And that night, Mitch went and created Boto 3. Don't fact check me, just believe me. So other products also started noticing this, the need for infrastructure provisioning that people had, and the pain that they had to deal with. So this is the time around 2012, 13, that configuration management tools had a war going on. We had Puppet, Chef, Ansible. We had many things that were configuration management tools, but then they wanted to win the market. They wanted to be the big guy in that industry. So they started offering solutions and services for that problem. So in this case, we have Puppet. So Puppet is a configuration management tool. It's built on top of Ruby. It has its own DSL, which is questionable. I'll get to that. And one of the issues that it has is you can create resources, but Puppet doesn't quite have a proper referencing system. You cannot create a resource and reference it somewhere else and then in another resource. And you will see in this example that the security group is created at the top, and then in the next resource, which is the EC2 instance, it's been referenced, but the reference is a string. So it's a bit of a hack. Then we had Chef also around the same time. Chef is also a Ruby-based configuration management tool. And they were a little bit more smart about that, I think, from a design perspective, because Ruby was designed to have a succinct and flexible syntax that minimizes syntactic noise and serves as a foundation for domain-specific languages. So that was Ruby. To go and build a DSL on top of a DSL, a language that was supposed to be a DSL, was a little bit questionable. But I think in case of Puppet, it worked pretty well as well. But probably not the best tool for the job. And Chef had a better go at that, because you could still create resources and reference them in the next resource. So that was nice. And then we have Ansible. Ansible also came to the picture. They had 2 ways of interacting with the API. They offered Ansible Cloud, which would basically make calls to AWS API on your behalf and manage your resources that way. So, but one of the big issues that Ansible had back then, when the cloud module was fairly young, was idempotency. If you declared an EC2 instance and you ran your Ansible code, you would get the result that you wanted. If you ran it the second time, it would give you another instance. It wouldn't go and modify your previous instance. So it didn't quite work that well. Until they fixed it, you had to either go and hack the modules and find a way to store the physical IDs of the resources that you were creating, which also meant that the lookups were going to be slow if you didn't do that, if you actually called the API to look for the resource that you were after. And sometimes you couldn't really quite find them because, if you create an EC2, you have to give it an identifier. You can have multiple EC2s with the same name. So it's not very easy to know what exactly you're referring to. So it created a bit of an issue. And if you wanted to have a persistent data storage for physical IDs, then the question was, where do you put it? Do you put it on S3? Do you put it on Git? So it really came with some challenges. And the other way of Ansible, using Ansible, was to generate CloudFormation templates, and I'll get to that one as well. Okay, and then we had infrastructure provisioners come up. So Terraform was one of those. The idea with Terraform was that you could define your infrastructure and run it on any platform. And as we all know, it's not quite, doesn't quite work like that in reality, but that was the premise. And it was a DSL created on top of Go that was much more specific to this specific problem. It wasn't a configuration management tool being hacked to act as an infrastructure provisioner. It was a dedicated tool for that job. And this is the template generator that I was referring to with Ansible using Jinja, because Ansible uses Jinja for its template engine. And someone thought that you can go create conditions and manage Jinja templates to give you JSON, the CloudFormation templates, which was absolutely insane in my opinion, because if you thought that the merge conflicts, if you thought the merge conflicts were bad with JSON as they were, now you have Jinja on top of it, and it becomes absolute madness. And you basically, you need to start. It's basically your entry into Sanitarium. And pay attention to the last line that I've crossed here, is that you also had to deal with commas, the trailing commas in JSON, which were not nice at all. And then someone thought, why don't we just use YAML? Because everyone was complaining about YAML and JSON. They were saying, well, why can't we just use YAML with CloudFormation? At the end of the day, YAML is a superset of JSON, which means that JSON is a valid YAML, but not the other way around. And why not just do that? And Amazon, it took a while until Amazon started supporting YAML, but a quick and dirty hack was to write your templates in YAML and transfer them and translate them into JSON when you needed to compile them, or build them, or and the other way around, and get your templates, transfer them from JSON into YAML, do your development, which meant that it was going to be a nicer experience. And all you needed to do for that, it was literally these 10, 15 lines of code to get you going. Then we had some other template generators come to market. We had Troposphere. Troposphere was a Python tool, and it used the document object model. And they basically are wrappers for CloudFormation resources. So this would give you some nice things. It would give you Python syntax checks. You could do some linting. The pull requests were easier to deal with. Python is pretty strict about how you write your how you style your code. So it meant it was going to be a nicer experience, and they also gave you access to all the tools that are available to you in a programming in a programming language, like if conditions and loops and multiple files. So it would really solve a lot of problems for you. And some other tools started coming to market that they were doing the same thing, but they were just built in on top of different languages. So in this example, we have CFNDSL, which was a Ruby tool that gave you access to all the imperative Ruby tools, like loops and conditions, very similar to Python. So, and it was very useful if you needed to deal with user data. So if you imagine you're creating an EC2 that you need to give it a big chunk of user data, which are basically can be shell scripts, escaping strings can be pretty messy. And with a template generator, that problem was going to be solved for you, because you could still have your script in a separate file and then include it in your template at compile time. And more of these tools popped up. You have Go Formation, similar tool written in Go, Sparkle Formation, a Ruby tool that did the same thing. So these were the tools that were available to us. And fun fact number 5, in 2015, Amazon announces that they're not supporting SOAP API anymore. And in 2016, Amazon announces YAML support for CloudFormation. And I imagine they borrowed this code, but in reality, they're doing a little bit more. They support YAML tags, which is a very nice touch. But essentially, I think what is happening right now, I'm fairly confident that when you upload your YAML template, it gets converted into JSON and fed into CloudFormation. So some of the other problems that started arising were that we had multiple stacks. So managing multiple stacks, running CloudFormation is not nice. You have Lambda. If you have to create a bucket, upload your template. You have to, same thing with Lambdas. You have to zip your files, put them on S3, reference them on the template. It becomes very messy. So there was a need for a CloudFormation runner, if you will. And this is a tool that Enabler team have developed called CloudFormation Seed. We used it extensively, and you will see that in this example, you define your CloudFormation stacks and use the output of one as an input into the other one. It also gives you access to some custom tags. For example, Lambda zip looks at your, it just gets a zip file of your Lambda and uploads it to S3 and reference it to your template. And you can use other tools like Make to generate those zip files when you're building or deploying your templates. All right, so fun fact number 6, this is slide 32, and we're pretty much done with the history, and we're ready to talk about the latest and possibly maybe greatest, I'm not sure, and that's CDK. So CDK was announced in 2019. This is basically how it looks, that example that I have shared. This particular example is using Python, and you may say it looks exactly like Troposphere, right? What's the big deal about it? And I agree, it does look like Troposphere in that example specifically, but there's a little bit more to it, and I'm going to talk about that. And let's not forget that Troposphere is a template generator. It has wrappers around CloudFormation resources, which are your objects in Python. And you will also notice that my buddy Mitch is here with that example, and when he submitted the example, he broke the build somehow. All right, so CDK stands for Cloud Development Kit. It's open source. It's a polyglot framework using JSII or JS2. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. It stands for JavaScript Interoperability Interface, which means that it allows languages other than JavaScript make calls to SDKs written in, or libraries written in JavaScript. Because of that, that means they support TypeScript, JavaScript, Python, Java, and C#. So they write the library once, but other languages can make calls to those. It generates CloudFormation templates at the end of the day, and it performs packaging and deployments very similar to CloudFormation Seed. It creates the buckets for your CloudFormation, uploads your templates to those buckets, zips your lambdas. It does all of those nice things. And it doesn't use a document object model like Troposphere. Instead, it uses a what's known as constructs. And what are constructs? So the idea with constructs is that you define your infrastructure in logical ways. Instead of saying that, I'm looking for an EC2 or an ELB or whatever, you define the service that you're trying to create. Your construct becomes a web service, for example, and then you deploy that construct in your as an application. Okay, so some of the do's with CDK is that you can use logic statements. You can have if conditions, for loops. You can use object-oriented techniques to create your models. You can use inheritance. You can create classes. You can create singleton classes. You can do all sorts of things if you really want to. You can create a high-level abstraction of your services and share them and publish them to your team, or company, or community. So, for example, if you're the cloud person, cloud team in a big microservices team project, you can create these constructs in a shared library and share that across other teams, so everyone gets very similar, consistent results. So you want to organize your project into logical modules and reuse that infrastructure. You can test that infrastructure, especially if you are going to share the library that you're developing to other people, and it has lots of branching, meaning that you can pass different parameters under certain circumstances. Different resources are getting created, some resources are not getting created. Then you really want to cover all the bases. And then you can use your existing code review process and workflow, and it gives you some other nice things like code completion and live syntax checks, because you're writing your code in, let's say, TypeScript or C# or whatever, and your IDE already has very strong support for what you want to do. And here's an example for inheritance. So in this example, I am creating the next Facebook killer app, and you will see that I have created a Lambda stack. And Lambda stack is my class that uses extending the stack class from CDK, and I am giving it the functions that I care about in my Lambda stack. And that Lambda stack can be inherited again, or multiple instances of it can be created. For a shared library, here's another example. I think just for the sake of the argument, let's go with this example. So some of my team members may be familiar with this code. And before RAFF3 resolvers were a thing in multi-account AWS installations, you would, if you wanted to have a central DNS across your account and your on-premise services, you have to nominate an account to be your go-to zone for all of your other hosted zones. So if you wanted someone else from another account to be able to interact with their hosted zone that was in another account, then it was going to be a little bit messy. They either had to go through a lot to assume roles and do all sorts of juggles to be able to make that change. Or in our case, the best solution that we had implemented was a custom resource, which is Lambda, that we would deploy across sub-accounts, and sub-accounts would use that as a custom resource in their CloudFormation to create those entries in hosted zones in another account, so with minimum amount of access required. And it worked for the most part, but it had some issues in terms of people not being familiar with it, they had to go and read documentation, understand how it works, and it wasn't really intuitive either. When it worked really well. So if you had CDK, what we could have been doing was we could create a module for a cross-hosted zone and say, all you need to do is just use this object or use this class, and you will get access to resources in another account without actually knowing how it's being done. Is you just use this because this is a library that we are providing. It's an SDK for our company, or it's our company's CDK, and you can use this to make those create those resources. So it would have been a very nice thing for us. But eventually, what happened in this example was that Amazon resolvers, RAD53 resolvers, were announced, and resource sharing as well, which meant that we could still have multiple accounts, multiple hosted zones across those accounts, and that problem was solved for us anyway. But this is just an example. So this is an example of a module in CDK. So there are some helper modules that CDK gives to you. In this example, we're looking at documentation for a database cluster. If you want to create an RDS database, you will use this class, and it has a property for password rotation. So if you don't provide a password for your database construct, because you don't want to have that password sitting in your repository, because that's also another issue. You don't want to store secrets in your code, even though there are some other ways like parameter store that you can, or secret store that you can use. CDK can manage all of that for you. So if you don't provide a password, what happens is a password will be generated for you. It will be stored in Secret Manager, and it will be also referenced to be used by your database. And then you can also set rotations for it, which means it creates a Lambda that triggers on an interval, let's say once a day or once a month, whatever you like, and it goes and updates that secret accordingly. At the moment, if you want to do this, that means you have to go and create that Lambda yourself, and you're probably going to make quite a bit of mistakes in doing that. But CDK already gives you these sort of tools, which is extremely nice and helpful. Okay, so here's how you write a test case. Probably very similar to any other test cases that you may have seen with RSpec or the other libraries that I'm not very familiar with. You describe the test that you want to do, you set it up, you get it to do what you want to do, and then you verify the results. And in this example, a DynamoDB that's being created, you're testing that DynamoDB has encryption enabled. So which also reminds me, if you create a CDK module or library for your company, that means you can enforce some of the things that you really care about. So when Tushar was talking about S3 or EBS volumes not being encrypted, that's after the fact. The resource has been created, then you want to check that everything is up to scratch. But you can also make sure that doesn't happen to begin with. So if you say, instead of using the S3 object from the CDK, use our namespace and the S3 object, all we've done is that we've inherited from the S3 class, and we are setting the property of encryption to true. So that means every time we create S3, you can specify explicitly that you want that S3 bucket to be encrypted, or even if you forget, we're going to create it for you encrypted anyway, right? And in this case, this test case is checking that those templates that are generated are in fact creating resources with encryption enabled. So it's very useful for modules and shared libraries. If you have one CDK repository that doesn't have a lot of if, then this, that conditions, then writing test case can be a little bit probably redundant. But if you have a lot of branching, definitely want to test those cases to cover everything. And one of the other nice things about this is if you're using JavaScript or TypeScript, you can use npm or yarn for your dependency management, NuGet in C#, Maven, Gradle in Java, or pip in Python to explicitly say what modules of CDK you want to download. So which means you basically can have versions for your libraries. And when you release a new version, everyone who hasn't upgraded their dependency lists are still going to go get the older versions. And they can also get them from your internal company's artifact repository, be it Nexus or Artifactory or what have you. And that's a very nice touch. Some of the don'ts with CDK, things that you don't want to do is async programming. With JavaScript, it's a big deal. Everything is non-blocking. Most things are non-blocking, so you don't want to. It is actually recommended to write blocking code, so you don't want to do async programming. In terms of direct AWS calls, you don't want to do that. If you're looking for a secret, you don't want to make a call to grab the secret and put it in template. You want to let the template, you let CloudFormation manage that for you. Or in some cases, if you have to, there are things that there's no CloudFormation resource for. You can make AWS calls from your CI or from your laptop, but don't do that. Just create a custom resource and let that be done for you. Unfortunately, there's no support for stack sets in CDK, unless they've added it in the past couple of days. I'm not aware of. It's also is very fast-paced under development actively, 24/7. Lots of things are getting fixed. Lots of new features are being added. Lots of refactoring happening. So unfortunately, backwards compatibility is not their primary concern at the moment. It's I think they're doing a fairly good job with deprecations, but things move really fast. So you want to be on top of those, which means every once in a while you upgrade your library because you want a new resource, and things stop working, or the signatures have changed in functions and methods, and create some some pain for you. Also, if you create your AWS CDKs for your company, then it has some pitfalls as well. It becomes a proprietary framework. It will have its own learning curve. If you make it too complicated, people not only have to learn CDK, they also need to learn about your library and how you've set it up. So, it becomes a burden. Maintenance, you have to make sure you don't break anyone else if you're adding features to your library. So you have to write a lot of test cases. These are things to be aware of. And it's an imperative language. Let's say we're using TypeScript or JavaScript, whatever. It's an imperative language that generates a declarative artifact that's run by another imperative system behind the scenes. So we have gone full circle. It's a little bit awkward like that. And it can also go behind your back and create a lot of resources that you don't know. I mean, it's not going to go and create, 100 NAT gateways, then you get a massive bill at the end of the month. It's going to create little things that you probably don't need sometimes. So, and checking the templates can be a little bit cumbersome because the templates that it generates are extremely massive. It has a lot of metadata in them, and looking at them all the time is not very good. So if you create a library, give it to your team, then they may not quite understand what they're building. So which can be a bit of a problem. So if someone doesn't know what they're deploying, should they be deploying things? Probably not. I'm looking at the pulse of the repository. You can see that it's extremely active. Lots of resources being created in the past in the month of September in this example. Lots of issues have been raised, lots of issues have been closed, lots of new features have been created, so actively under development. Gives you some really nice things. You can do a diff of your current stack and what is going to be stack before you deploy, so you get a preview. Sometimes you get a nice notification about if you're changing let's say, an S3 bucket ACL, you get notified that you may be causing some issues. You may do some things that you not necessarily want, especially if you're trying to make, say, a S3 bucket public. You get a notification, which is nice. All right, so would I recommend CDK? Yes, I would, and make my buddy Mitch happy. I have used it personally for my own personal projects, it's sometimes easier to start with CDK than start with a pure JSON CloudFormation, even if it's a small thing. It's just so much nicer to build once you have it set up on your machine and you have the tools ready. It's a no-brainer. And for more information, have a look at the CDK pages. I've shared the links here. CDKworkshop.com has a bit of a training, and CDKpatterns.com has some patterns that you can use, like event bridges and lambdas and whatnot. That's the patterns that you don't want to necessarily write from scratch. Or it's a really good learning experience as well. If you those constructs that I talked about, you can just reuse the ones that are already available from CDKpatterns.com. All right, and one of the interesting things that we're seeing is that recently it was announced that CDK for Kubernetes is also being announced, created, or is actually active at the moment, which uses the same philosophy around constructs and the way you define your projects. The only difference is that instead of generating JSON templates, it gives you a Kubernetes YAML file that you can use in your project. So I haven't used it myself, but it seems like that it's headed that way. And who knows, maybe CDK becomes a standard and other providers start using it as well. So that's CDK 8s.io, cdkubernetes.io. All right, so that's me. Has there been any questions?
Perhaps if I unmute myself. Hey, Hamid, thank you very much for that. We've got time for one question, which is good because we've had one asked. Priya asked in the YouTube channel, was actually a two-parter. With the CDK, how do you deal with parameters, particularly parameters in different environments?
So there are different ways. You can use environment variables, and you can also use stages. As far as I'm aware, you can create, not stages, they're called contexts. You can create contexts and pass those contexts to your template when you run them, and your template looks at that context and goes, what is this environment name? Is it dev, pre-prod, prod, whatever? And so when you run your CLI, I think the best way of doing that is to give it a set of stage parameters that act very similar to environment variables. You can do that as well. I think it's not an ideal way of doing it.
Cool. All right. Thank you very much for that. It was very informative. I had a few moments of trauma there, looking back at the old EC2 API, which is actually still the current EC2 API. But yeah, I'm glad to see they've come a long way with the CDK.
Yeah, a lot has changed, and we're going to see more, I guess. But yeah, it's always on the move. It's interesting to see how different it is in the past 16 years. A lot has changed.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. I see you've got the careers page up there. Are you guys hiring at the moment?
Yes, we are, as usual. If you found this interesting and you would like to get your hands on tools like CDK or solving this kind of problems for enterprises, get in touch with me and we'll talk.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, that was fantastic. I am unmuted. That's good. Thank you very much, Hamid. That was awesome. Just a gentle reminder that Enabler are our gold sponsors, and they've been very supportive of the community over the years. So if you are interested in the stuff they're working out, I can definitely recommend that you talk to them. All right, let's wrap this up. We are quite well over time at the moment. Thanks very much to what I'm going to put down as thermal issues with my laptop. Everything just seemed to grind to a halt. Like, couldn't write to disk, couldn't do anything. So video started buffering. Like, it was just bad. Anyway, we're through that now. So our next event is the 25th of November, and that will be our last regularly scheduled event for 2020. That will be a virtual event still. Definitely going to round the year out with virtual events, even if we are allowed to meet in person again. We probably won't be doing a single specific reInvent wrap up that we normally do this year, purely because there is no one reInvent event. It drags on for 3 weeks, but it does look like there's a lot of great content coming up, and we will be doing something. So watch this space, and we'll work out how exactly we're going to fit into AWS schedules and what we can do and what we can get the community involved in. So look forward to that. You'll hear from us about that at the next event, of course, and before then, no doubt. So just a big thank you to our sponsors one last time, our gold sponsors Enabler, AC3, CMD, and Do It International, our 3 silver sponsors. Again, we couldn't do these events without their help. And then finally, well-deserved beer if you're not at home, or if you prefer to go to a higher shelf, as Dan would say. I will post the link into the Slack channel in a moment. And we'll see you all on Zoom. If not, we'll see you next month. Enjoy your freedom. Thanks very much.